Okay, so we should be live now. So welcome to the fourth session of our Global Groove Electronic Music Journalism Workshop Program, hosted by Groove in collaboration with the Goethe-Institut. We meet every workday from 1 p.m. CEST to about 3 p.m. CEST to discuss and dissect several topics and work practices in the realm of contemporary music journalism. If you'd like to participate or have any questions, please use the YouTube live chat and we will try to collect them all and ask on your behalf by the end of the session if time allows it. I'm moderating this together with my colleague Laura Aha, who can say hi now.
Hi guys, thanks for joining us again.
And today's guest is Christoph Benkeser, who is based in Vienna, Austria, and who will talk about a very crucial aspect of any freelancer's work, which is how to write a pitch and get your story published. Two very different things sometimes. But I'm very curious to hear what he has to say about this subject, because I think very fittingly, I got to know Christoph and started to work with him because he pitched me something during my time as an editor at Groove magazine, and I continued to work with him. And while I was an editor at Specs later on, a magazine for which he also wrote. And apart from doing freelance work for those two magazines, one of which is now defunct, he has also a radio show, and yikes, that wasn't me. Writes for publications like Mika, Music Austria. While his main focus is music and the culture around it, he also deals with social or political topics in his work. And like I said, I'm very interested in hearing what he has to say, because personally, I am terrible at pitching. I'm also very curious what he has to say about the subject. If a certain editor, maybe tries to convince you to write something very, very different from what you originally pitched them, which is something that might have happened between us, or maybe not, who knows. Anyhow, I'll just leave the stage to Christoph, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing what he has to say.
Well, thanks, Christopher, for it's flattering to all your words, basically. Yeah, thanks so much. I'm Christopher. I'm sitting here in Vienna. It's pretty hot outside already, but hope my laptop doesn't lift off and explodes in the meantime. I'm going to talk a bit about the topic of how to pitch a story, or as you can say, how to not blow it with editors, or let's better say how to nail a story to get it published and hopefully paid, which is of course a blatant lie to begin with. I won't teach you how to pitch a story successfully or not, because I'm not a teacher. And to be completely honest, as a freelance writer and editor, I'm not, or maybe I'm barely, entitled to tell you of upcoming and obscure music acts from at the back of beyond. But besides that, I'm not a teacher. I can't tell you how to do things right, and I can't tell you how to do things wrong. But I'm going to take some time and some input on explaining my experiences. Second, and even though I do just that in a minute, I don't really believe in those, teacher-centered models and of, understanding and learning. So this means, even though I'll do just that for a couple of minutes now, you got to stop me, and I'm totally serious on this. Nothing ever good happens when a single person tells you what is right or wrong. And believe me, I'm from Austria. I know what it's all about. So just to be clear, that's not in my interest, and I reckon that it's not in yours as well. Just the fact of somebody talking for an hour, is upright ridiculous, and there's no textbook way or approach of pitching a story. So it's ridiculous, and it's the complete opposite of what we're trying to do here today, namely finding, a reflective approach on talking about a topic that is very important and very crucial, I guess, but always tends to be a bit underestimated. So still, I do believe in the collective effort and in the fruitful, exchange with people as a way to counteract structural bias and the institutional problems within a given field, like the one we're basically trying to make a living in. So we try to focus a little bit on that. And before we start off, I just show you this little slide, and I promise you that's the last slide with written word and text on it. So before you switch tabs, be in line. We're going to see some pictures and stuff. So I will tell you things that you probably are aware of anyway, which means that you can raise your, Christoph also pointed it out before, you can raise your virtual hand whenever you think you want to say something. I don't know, bring something in, or discuss a certain point I either missed or took into the wrong direction. So that's just because everybody makes mistakes. There's no real wrong or right way, but anyway, everybody makes them, and so do I. Therefore, you're very much invited to, just stress different ideas and tell us how you're basically handling things, and basically broaden our horizon and our collective horizon, but just telling us how you think about this or that point. I think we can all agree that this very situation we are here into like this video conference is not ideal or nor the very best. It's perfect because there are people coming from all over the world, and it's really interesting to do that. But I would prefer to sit with you in a room and just talk in person because it's so much more easier. But I guess you've had your fair share of video conferences this week already, so you kind of know how hard it is to follow somebody talking, for an hour on a screen after a certain period of time. As said, just raise your hand, give me a shout, or write in the text. Apparently there is one in Zoom. I never checked this out before, but Christopher and Laura are there, and I think it will just be fine. Overall, I want to keep things, as open as possible, which means I will give you some input now, but I also want to stress again that I'm not the only one, and I'm definitely not the one to talk and tell you about right or wrong pitches. I can, in a way, only speak for myself. And, as a cis white male person, I have a very limited perspective on things. And therefore, I tend to reflect on that a lot and, just, raise consciousness. And if you think that I'm missing the point, just, shout it out, and we'll discuss, I guess. I think it will going to work like this, and will just be fine. So you might actually be asking, what can I offer when I cannot offer that much today? So what can I offer today is to share some actual knowledge from my point of view that I've kind of picked up over the last couple of years, and during my career as let's call it professional, whatever. But this obviously entails that there's no guarantee for completeness or anything in my words whatsoever. It's mostly the stuff I've learned and considered to be helpful in some ways, I guess. And therefore, I'd like to work against my own and let's call it the industry's blind spots, and those we all, unconsciously or not, share and reproduce. So maybe we can just, take some input out of those knowledge and out of those experience I made, and you're very free to share your experiences afterwards, and hopefully we can have a a fruitful exchange. That means that giving a little bit of input doesn't mean that, and I stress this so much because it's really important to me, that I don't tell you how to do things right or wrong. I don't want to take things for granted, which means that I want to question myself. And I think that's a really a crucial element to not only pitching, but being a journalist, a music journalist in general, because we all try to avoid, the institutional force, which pressures you into, a structural bias that is, I'd say, absolutely toxic to begin with, but sadly still out there, and it's kind of ubiquitous. And because of that, and that's kind of totally off the records, even though I know that we are live on YouTube. I mean, the industry is kind of fucked, and you got to say it like this because it brings it on the point. And it's a shit show. And, sometimes professional circles tend to be some, ominous gated communities where it's extremely hard to get into because there's obviously strongly armed gatekeepers out there preventing you from getting an insight into this, promised land, aka, the unspoken secrets of what we call music journalism. And I think all of that happens because, just of the fact that this widely fucked up fear of sharing, a seemingly rotten cake already with somebody who might be a potential intruder or whatever you want to call it, by, taking more than others might get. And to be completely honest, we are no beginners in this field, in this discussion today. No beginners, and that means we can actually do something about it and, work for each other and with one another instead of against each other. Yeah, I just want to keep that in mind because I think it's a problem that lies in the responsibility, of editors and magazines, which need to work against this very glass ceiling that I talked about before. And this also goes pretty well with our today's topic, because there's not really a golden rule, to pitch. There are just some experiences you can make or cannot make actually during the years you're trying to do your work as a freelancing music journalist. And I think it's in our responsibility, to share and pass on those experiences, because that's really what's it all about. There's no golden way, it's only the experiences. And therefore we can make it a little bit more transparent and, develop a more diverse or, heterogeneous field we all share. So personally, I've had my fair share of those experiences over the last couple of years. Still, I can't speak for everyone. Those experiences might be useful for some, but they might be totally pointless, for others. And if you feel like I'm missing a point, again, just shout it in or write it in the text. I want to keep things as open as possible. The great opportunity about this conference that Laura and Christopher set up, and in contribution with Goethe-Institut, I think is that we can really share our insights and our different experience in the field, because we are coming from so many different parts of the world. And as said, I will mostly talk about my experiences now, but I want to stress that we have a very open discussion afterwards. And I'm really, really interested in what you're thinking and how you're handling things wherever you live. There are, of course, many different ways to pitch. And I guess there are even more turns to take. And a lot of them are already out there, which means if you make I kind of missed that slide. But if you made the terrific choice, of Googling the topic, you'll get an exuberant, insight into the various problems and difficulties on pitching. I mean, people have written about, how to successfully pitch the New York Times, and you'll find listicles about the most, common mistakes you can make. And of course, there's also listicles about, pieces on how to avoid those mistakes, which is kind of, insane. But personally, I tend to find those pieces at the same time, let's say, intriguing and pointless. And intriguing because because of the sheer number actually that people have written about this specific topic in the past and considered it to be important. And it kind of makes me wonder, that may be a thing, and not only now but in the past as well. But I considered it also a bit pointless because the most of those articles really stress their perspective as common knowledge, and there may be some exceptions, but it's basically a lot of pieces on how they take things for granted. Which is of course, which is of course not only institutional bullshit, but not transparent to begin with, and doesn't help you as a writer. And if you're not in the industry or if you're not a journalist already, so that's completely pointless to me. So, as Christopher pointed out before, I've been a music journalist for a couple of years now, working for different publications in German-speaking area, and I had also been permanently employed with Wise and Noisy for some time, where basically I was the last remaining editor in the Austrian office before they kind of decided to sack the entire editorial team. And it's kind of if you think about like the Titanic's band keep playing after the ship has sunk, it's pretty much on point, except that the ship was a multi-billion-dollar company and the band like a tiny office in the Alps somewhere. But I mean, I don't have really mixed feelings about that because I really enjoyed my time over there, and it was interesting because I was in the position to work with a lot of freelancers from Austria, Switzerland, and Germany, to say. And I really learned a lot of things during this time. It's not really about, as Laura pointed it out before, it's not really about only filing pitches yourself, but also reading them. And so it mostly entailed, the job mostly entailed getting people's, ideas and thoughts and probably words out there, which I still consider to be a fucking great responsibility. And I really enjoyed that a lot. And in turn, it gave me the experience I can talk about now. So maybe that's what I can offer here today. And I want to talk a little bit, not only about my freelancing work, but also as my time over my time as an editor with Noisy and Wise. So during my time as a full-time employee with Noisy, I received a lot of pitches, and when I mean a lot of pitches, that's really how it is. I think there are maybe two reasons for that. That was mostly because, as I said, I was the last remaining editor in Austria, and responsible for handling things over there. And second, I guess Wise and Noisy at that period of time still, and I don't know if it's true already, but still kind of had this image, of being a publication where things may be handled a bit different, more, they say, or they probably not say, but think it edgy and whatever, it's just a bit more unconventional. Long story short, from a lot of the pitches I got, a lot were really, really bad, and not really pursuable to actually commissioned to be written. A lot varied from lukewarm ideas to kind of hot garbage stories about really nothing I would ever want somebody to write about, not to say get it published. So in hindsight, I mean, the really bad thing about that is that I may have turned down a lot of people who are really good writers and tend to be really good writers. But I will never know because for one reason, and actually for one reason only, because their pitches were so utterly bad, And this kind of, I mean, I use this stock photo, but which brings us to the core of today's topic, I guess, pitching, because it seems pretty easy. And I mean, it even sounds a little bit, negligible, but that's, I think, the exact reason why there are a million bad pitches out there, all getting deposited at, the bad pitches graveyard, as we call it, used to call it actually. And that is actually a shame because there are not so many good pitches out there, and it shouldn't be actually like this, because writing a pitch or a good pitch is nothing you can't learn. It's work, and basically it's the experience of work and the experience you get out of it. But there's always always a little bit of chance involved in this whole process too. But given that you're a freelance writer, and we all share, the collectivity of being a freelance writer here, to some point at least, pitching is in a way like, blasting, blasting an 808 on a trap track. It's just you do it right or you do it wrong, but you got to do it. It's nothing you can weasel yourself out of, and at the same time, it's not something we are born to be doing right in the first place. We need to train it, and pitch after pitch and experience after experience, we kind of get more experienced and more good at it. And as said, I mean, during my time at Noisy, I really turned down too many pitches, and it's a shame. It's not really easy, not because it's hard to ditch a bad pitch, but because it's hard to tell someone that their work or their idea and the work they put into this idea is not enough. It's that they have to think it through even further, or from scratch, or I mean, even from a different perspective. But that's totally inevitable as an editor, I guess, because that's what they are there for. And I think that's one of the perspectives you should or want to keep in mind as a freelance writer, to think a little bit about the position of an editor, because we're going to talk a little bit about this in a bit, but I really want to stress this as a mandatory preparation before you should even consider doing a pitch. Just thinking about how would you react getting 50 pitches a day. I mean, that's a little bit over the top, but anyways, that's basically what we want to think about. And I would also want this want to call this the before you pitch, you need a fully formed idea phase of pitching, and because that really goes to the heart of it all. Because there's nothing really there's nothing worse than pitching an editor a story that is not really a story, not fleshed out in a way. It's as a freelance writer, you need to figure out what a story is, and this may sound obvious in a way and laughable to a certain extent, but anyone who fields pitches for a living and lives of writing for publications as a freelancer will tell you it's not. no editor, and I include myself during my time at Noisy, expects you to have a fully formed and a fully written article before you pitch, you know. But what you should have is a clear picture of what the story is or might be about, and that means where things are potentially heading at and which points you will covering in the story, you know. And most good pitches I received, and I try to do them myself, receive some, you know, include some basic narrative elements, and like a specific focus point or a central question why this is literally the story you want to write and get paid for. Ideally, I guess that there should be, you know, like a general assumption, like a thesis that kind of carries the story, which is basically the most important thing to an idea and to form it into a pitch, I guess. So this means, like, considering a situation as a music journalist, simply writing about you know, an event, and I can, like, you know, what was a good example? Like, hey, I'm heading to Berghain to get pissed in the dark room, whatever. Do you want to publish my story on that? That's not enough, you know. By the way, no, we don't want to read that, and but have fun, whatever, you know. But it's not it's not sufficient to pitch, like, you know, just the idea of going to an event or about an album or whatever. It's very single-sided, and that's basically what I mean when I say a single topic is not enough, because there's no real hook to the story, and you always kind of want to narrow the whole idea down to you know, an assumption or a thesis that could probably fit into one sentence, and therefore you want to have an interesting hook. It's kind of like, yeah, what about an article, you know, about clubbing in Berlin? You know, in some case, it might be interesting, but people have written about that so many times. There's really no interesting hook to it anymore, and I think there's a lot of editors who just, you know, even ignore those pitches because it's senseless to follow and pursue them, and otherwise they're just going to tell you that there's no hook to the story, and that's basically it. Like, yeah, how to get into Berghain, for example, you know, just Googling it makes it so you know, annoying. So a lot of pitches I received during my time with Noisy never really got beyond this point. And, you know, to a certain extent, when I think about it with some distance, I kind of understand why. Because, you know, we are all the way we are because our lives somehow, you know, changed because of some artist or some, you know, some record, some album, some event, maybe. And probably because we're, you know, we were kind of, you know, really into that, and the energy and the, you know, the impact conjured by the record or by the event or whatever. Otherwise, I'd say we would not be doing and trying to make a living in this field. I mean, there is a certain, you know, there is a certain romanticized version about that. So in a way, it makes kind of sense to pay back the emotional debts we feel incurred, you know, like writing about an artist that either had or has, you know, an impact on us. And of course, I guess there's something to be said about, you know, honest appreciation. And I think that's super cool because a lot of good writing can, you know, come out of admiration and appreciation, but there needs to be a single, and there needs not to be a single, but there needs to be a hook to the, to the story. At least if you want to get your story published and also paid. And I think appreciation alone is not enough to do so. This goes, and I tend to tell you a bit about my time at NYSE again. It goes especially for pitches on albums and events, and you can tell pretty quickly because the normal pitch goes like, yeah, I think this album, it's so great, it's so seminal, what a product of a certain time, it rules, I don't know, and they kind of ask you, yeah, can I write about that album? And there's not really a hook to that. Who wants to read that actually? I mean, you kind of want to get to a point where you can not only appreciate the album, but actually get to a hook and add a hook to the given topic. So you need a better reason than that, because pretty much any record or album or artist is a certain product of a certain time, I guess, and there's nothing in there to kind of making the cut of having an interesting hook, and to follow it further. So as said, there's a romanticized, version to this. I wrote, or I want to write about my album. I want to write about this record. I want to write about this event approach, which sometimes, obscures the fact that you're pitching an idea to an, actual publication and not to your Facebook timeline. The thing is, and we'll go into details about this a bit later, that your article needs to sell. And I know this is a hard topic to talk about, and it's kind of intriguing, but running a publication, is basically like running like any other business you can think of. It's like running a record label, for example. If you want to earn a minimum living wage out of it, you need to adapt to certain structures that cannot be denied, I guess. And that's hard to take. And honestly, I would be, and I know that Christoph and Laura are thinking possibly the same, and I'm pretty much interested in what you think about that afterwards, that we are all kind of sharing the thought that we would change or want to change that. But at the moment, it's kind of like, one of the facts we can't ignore, however compelling it might be to write, a lengthy story about one of your favorites records or so. So no matter how well you craft your words and your metaphors or whatever you can think of, say, I don't know, this crazy tribal influenced disco house record from, I don't know, from the 80s, which you just stumbled upon by chance on Discogs. There is no real hook to that, and we need to find out what's the hook is and what's the really interesting part, and who wants to read like a single story about this record, for example. I mean, it's kind of a bad example, but because we are all into that obscure shit, to a certain degree at least, I think we would all take the time and read that article, because that's what we do basically, yeah. But who else is going to take the time to read that? And we have to think about that. The point of it really is that we have to consider like the fine line between, admiration and a professional outlook. And I think, yes, even between impact and failure. That's a very, business way of approaching this whole thing, I guess. But there's no really a final answer to this question. And I don't think that I will ever find this fine line. Even though it's not really about finding the line, it's about making, considering it and reflecting it, and getting your story into this grand scheme cautiously in a way to pitching, because some publication, because you want some publication to actually pay for it. So now you want to think about that and approach it a bit cautiously. As said, I know that those financial aspects are kind of hard to talk about and kind of kills, any any romance to the appeal, of writing about the thing you like and the thing you love, basically. In the end, though, I guess it's about figuring out how your article will sell. And that means which hook is pushing it past the boundaries of, for fans only, and not least, why some editor, and you got to ask you this question at the beginning, kind of why some editor will commission you to write this exact story. So I reckon that you've heard about, or probably are even affected by the changes in music journalism and the decline in journalism jobs in general at some point in the last years. While some publications have shut down permanently, and we're all kind of in the same boat here, there are escalating traffic demands, and when I mean escalating, it really is escalating, because publications are definitely in a difficult position now. The question you got to ask yourself is, do you broaden, say, your niche-oriented model of writing and publishing articles, and push, towards a, celebrity-driven model, and, with endless video premieres and, promotion takeovers, and, not really a publication where there's, a reflective approach and no bad reviews and stuff, because of course most wider known artists are going to blast off their shit to, Instagram anyway. Or can you survive by, just living in your little precarious, precarious and independent bubble? If that's going to work, I mean, you got to ask yourself that. What's the way you want to pursue? I don't mean to delve into this right now, because it's like, opening Pandora's box, and we're hardly at the topic of today's workshop or lecture or whatever you want to call it anyway. But nevertheless, I think it's part of the thoughts we as music journalists want to think when we file a pitch, and therefore I think it's a thing when when we're approaching of pitching a story to a publication. We've talked about the aspect of the story's impact and why that at least to a certain extent is important to take into account. And it's no secret then the coverage of artists are either the coverage of artists that are either already extremely successful or, at the other side, controversially discussed, attract far more, attention, because readers actively, want to read about them. And of course, a well-written essay and, review can have a great impact when published at the right time. Otherwise, you can see the 4,200,000 million, I don't know, reviews about the Taylor Swift album wouldn't exist, and it's an easy way, just to draw people onto your publication site. And that's what each and every editor actually wants. They want traffic in some point. Otherwise, it's not going to make the cut. But we should not waste our time on, criticizing that model, because it keeps the whole thing and the whole industry going in a way. And when I think about saying that, I want to, I want to die, because actually we should criticize that model, but maybe not on a YouTube live stream or whatever. Yeah. On the other hand, let's consider, a more lengthier and more in-depth profile or essay, or profile, essay, whatever, for example, which by nature takes more time to read, and obviously more time to research and to write. And at the same time, you kind of have to think about which publication you want to pitch at, because there may be some chance that the actual profile you want to write about, for example, is kind of attaching to the publication's brand, and to fit its audience and fit its taste. And therefore you'll likely find a great in-depth a report on a fuzzy electronic music noise festival on, like, for example, The Wire, but you won't find it on Noisy. It's kind of the expectations that people who read those publications have, and that makes the possibility of a certain topic to be published. And I think it's important to keep that in mind and to consider, at least to an extent, I guess. So coming back to the fact that the good pitch should include, some basic narrative elements, as we talked about before, like a focus point or a general assumption. You want, or I generally suppose that you want to break down this thought or this idea into a brief synopsis, and I feel like we should stress the hook there for a little bit more before we talk about the synopsis and the brief introduction to your pitch. Because if I got a penny for like every time I was addressed with a single-sided and one-dimensional topic pitch, like those we kind of jokingly talked about before, I would kind of sip margaritas on a very distant island, where bad pitches cannot reach me anymore. But it's not that way, and it's not even kind of the tip of the iceberg, really. A lot of pitches that I got are just some tragically, bad high thoughts, and that don't really make any sense, at least not when you consider it in a moment of, sober reflection, or whatever you want to call it, A good indicator for this is kind of when you receive an email that says at the bottom line, "Send from my iPhone." You don't want that, you don't want to read "Send from my iPhone" on a pitch. It basically only shows that, you fired off kind of a half-baked idea without probably, thinking it through and thinking it to a certain extent. At least that's what my intention would be if I got a pitch, and I got many of them, like sent from my iPhone. And I don't think that I'm alone with this. It doesn't really mean that you shouldn't do your pitch via email. Of course, you actually should do your pitch via email, and obviously not through social media. And I want to stress this a lot, because I received, back at the time I was still on Facebook, I received a lot of pitches through, just, on my private Facebook page, whatever. And people found out on that and just sent me pitches on social media. You don't want to do that unless, and really, that's really important, I guess. And really only if some editor wants you to do that. If he says, pitch me on Facebook, Twitter, whatever. And even then I'd say email is your way to go, because, it's just more professional, I guess. This is also not the reason to, kind of forget about looking up who you're actually pitching to. And I totally mean it, because you want to know the person you're writing to. And that means do your research on the editor. Because first of all, it not only shows that you are a real person who passed like the capture test of emails or whatever you want to call it. But it also tells me as an editor that, you know, by receiving your email, that you took your time and found out what my name is, which means in turn that you probably took a glimpse at the stuff I do and therefore know where things might be heading. By the way, I think there's a common misconception about this, and I suggest you to never really blast off identical pitches to different publications. A lot of people do that, and you think you may save time by this. And I mean, yeah, well, actually you do save time, but chances are high that you'll never get any reply whatsoever, because the whole pitch is not personalized and editors don't want to be treated like numbers. And I mean, to be honest, not even numbers want to be treated like numbers, you know. It's just anyways, personalize your pitch, and that goes with an easy line like, hey, dear Christoph, or whatever, you know, just hi. But personalize it a little bit and look up the name of the editor you want to pitch at. And of course, this entails that you don't want to kind of pitch to your, you know, to the common magazine@info email address, because chances are still high that you won't get a reply either. That doesn't mean that you have to be overly attached, you know, and freak out on some editor's work and tell them how great they are. But you can, and I mean, everybody wants to be kissed on their ass, you know, sometimes, and I think it's kind of a, you know, kind of a good way to actually say, yeah, I've read your stuff and that's cool, and I have some similar thoughts, and maybe we can take things even further and whatever. So maybe you want to flatter some editor, but you shouldn't necessarily do that anyway. So, I mean, getting back to the high thoughts, and because, I mean, maybe that's just a noisy thing and not really considerable to Bandcamp or The Wire or whatever. But if you really want to write about, you know, how Chester Bennington's spirit lives on in the body of JC, that's actually pretty fine. But you get to tell me what the actual fuck, you know, your story wants to go, and where your story is actually going, because and I can't stress this too much, because an editor is going to ask you where things are heading, you know, and what the fuck the thing is about, because it's a nice thought. And I mean, if you have a hook and a twist to the story, you probably are able to sell at least a part of it. But a lot of times it's just, you know, random thoughts written in the very brief period between getting high and getting the munchies, you know. And I mean, I don't say that this is not the way to do things, to be honest, but that neither has, you know, a story like this neither has a focus point nor a very interesting hook to it if you don't really, you know, present it to me. And you know, just there should be some narrative elements to it, and more than like a catchy headline, which at some point could be enough for, you know, a noisy article, whatever. But before we get into the actual, you know, process of pitching a story, we kind of need to talk about the preparation, you know, a music journalist would want to make to develop the story idea and the story idea of your pitch. And I really can't stress this too much, because I think that a lot of great stories will never see the day of the light, just because they were ruined by, you know, some bad pitches. And to do this, I think it helps to kind of shift our thinking away from just finding an idea, which, you know, presumably makes the editor think that you just stumbled on it by chance. I mean, it's no secret that this can happen. And I've been told that there are some, magic record shelves somewhere hidden in a dusted corner of your brain, whatever, that carries a story, just by lifting it off this record shelf, it may be a really good story to tell, and nobody really heard about. But a lot of the times you want to make a big impact, and a lot of the times those stories wouldn't make the cut. So the impact and a solid enterprise story, as a solid enterprise story that makes a lot of impact, needs to have at least, a unique angle or what we called a hook before. There should be a hook, and it's absolutely necessary to think about that. And I stress this so much because it's absolutely inevitable to at least tell in one sentence at a pitch. This also includes that you check the archives of the publication you're planning to pitch at. Nothing shows off more than you didn't do your homework, than blasting off, an idea that has already been out there or been covered, been covered by the same magazine. That's even worse, I guess. But taking 2 seconds and Googling the whole thing is actually, one of the first things you want to do. And I probably should have addressed this earlier on, but I didn't. But yeah, you should do that, and it's kind of a mandatory step because you don't want to be repetitive. And I tell you this because you wouldn't believe how many people approached me at Noisy with an idea that basically went like this: hey, yeah, I like LSD. I'm going to this crazy party. Maybe do you want to publish this story about it? And I'm like, yeah, okay. There was a phase at Noisy where this was considered to be funny, but it was, and even then, it kind of, it was just a tragically bad idea, and just don't do that. It's really, that's just a bad example, but I think you get what I mean. So you don't want to waste your time by researching a topic that has already been covered or been written. If you still happen to do so, you should at least offer a new angle or, a new perspective on the original story, because otherwise it's just, cooked up garbage in a way that nobody in the world really wants to read about again. And that's really no thing you want to do. So there's, as you can tell, there's no real golden rule to follow to write a good pitch. But I think we should remember that, and also consider it again, that editors, and I can look into the faces of you right now, and Christopher and Laura also pretty much know, I guess, what I mean, that editors are, extremely busy by getting emails all day, and you want to receive pitches that make things a little bit easier for you. And so if you're emailing an editor, and especially one you don't have a working relationship with, like a cold pitch to, I don't know, Bandcamp, whatever, you want to make things as easy as possible, because that's your first impression and you want to get it right. So it starts at the like the subject headline or the subject line. There's really no golden rule to that. We just discussed it a little bit up front, but I would basically ditch a pitch if it says pitch in general letters in the subject line. A lot of editors tend to like this, obviously, but I would say go with a proposed headline, for example, or just not pitch, because it's just so, I mean, it's the same with interview request or whatever. I mean, it's not really, you know, it doesn't get to the point, and you want to get to the point as an editor because you get a lot of emails, and so therefore you want to, you know, succinctly introduce yourself, and the subject headline or the subject line is kind of part of the process, I guess. And after that, I mean, we talked about, you know, just personalizing the whole pitch by saying the editor's name, or just, you know, saying hi to the editor's name. But I think that it's very much important to, you know, just pitch in the span of just a few sentences. You know, if you pitch is more than a paragraph, at least if it's not a you know, an essay with, I don't know, 5,000 words on it, then your pitch wants to be succinct, you know. And if it's longer than a paragraph, it's probably too long already, because, I mean, my attention span is irretrievably damaged by, I don't know, whatever memes you can find on the internet. And that means get to the point fast. You know, you don't want to spend time on reading out, you know, your whole life story, whatever. Ideally, you have a sticking point, because an editor wants a sticking point, something that you know, can hold on to and basically carry the pitch. You know, for example, it needs to be more like, you know, I want to interview this special noise artist that I just found on Bandcamp, but it doesn't need to include, you know, like the whole artist's biography. You know, it's just tell me what's so special about that artist for yourself. And I think we can go from that, because otherwise I can assume, or I must assume, that it's just a generic, you know, Q&A with generic questions and probably generic answers. And who's supposed to read that, actually? I mean, it can be interesting, but you want to make things a bit more interesting than that, I guess. So I'm sure you have heard about, you know, the elevator pitch, and I mean, it's kind of a fitting picture, I guess. If you don't have heard of the elevator pitch, it's basically how you would describe a topic or larger topic to a person if you had only a brief elevator ride with them. So looking at this picture, imagine you're in an elevator with John Cage or with me, and there's some insanely bad music sound, you know, dabbling on us, and we're both in a rush. Still, you want to sell us a story or sell us an idea that you had and you're absolutely certain about. And what do you do, and how do you do that in like a, you know, enclosed space with little to no time? How do you do that? You get to the point and quick, you know, you highlight the important facts, actually, and you secure our already limited attention span, you know, by just coming to the point and leaving out details that we can discuss after you actually sold us the story, by giving us a hook or a twist, or, you know, like a really good angle on a topic that you want to cover. And you know, I mean, there might be a chance that you get through by just saying, hey, I want to interview this or that artist. But a lot of the times publications want to know what the story or what the interview will be about, and what's so special about this artist or the event, or, you know, whatever you want to cover, actually. So as you can see, I mean, it's really about, and we talked about it at the beginning, it's really about the fleshed out idea. If you have a story to tell, you will basically, and almost certainly, I guess, find someone to give you a platform to tell it. If not, that doesn't mean that you pitch, that you should actually stop pitching. It just means that the idea wasn't really that cooked out and fleshed out as it seemed in the beginning. And it just needs some more work and some more, you know, just maybe a hook, or maybe, you know, an interesting approach on handling things. And of course, yeah, as I said before, it may also be entailed with a little bit of luck and chance, because it may just not be the right time to pitch this story to a publication or to an editor. I mean, you should always consider this in a way, because the editor obviously, becomes like a Google two-factor authentication to get it out, which means that he should be the one to be interested, because he needs to sell the story after all, and because the editor needs to make sure of that. Your take has to be considered to reach not only to be interesting, but also to reach a considerable amount of people. And that's basically what you think of when you get to the point of actually pitching a story, to think about the impact of it. Therefore, I strongly suppose and suggest that like a 2 or 3 sentence synopsis of the overall story should not only offer an original focus and take on the topic related to the publication, but it should also make clear that you can narrow down and really narrowing down the story in an interesting way. It's not about writing 5 paragraphs that might be interesting and stuff, but it's really about narrowing down the story and bringing it to a point where we can actually go further from it. If you need more space than like space and more time, ergo to research and to pitch, that's basically on your turn. If you need more time, that's cool, but I think you need a really good reason to actually pitch more than like say 10 sentences or whatever, at least if it's not a really long and in-depth story about whatever. So what I mean by this is that it always starts and ends in a way with a reflection on your own position. That means ask yourself, do I have a story to tell? What's the story about? And where lies the broader and more general interest of the story, of the actual story? In other words, where are the narrative elements that carry the story? And I mean the whole story, not only your pitch. If you're able to answer those questions for yourself, you probably can answer any questions that may or may not occur in the process of pitching. It shows, it's simply, as an editor, if you receive an email like this, it shows that you've done your research, and that's pretty much where things start to get great, And I want to stress this even a little bit further, because a lot of the times I got pitches by which you can tell that there's no real point in, writing the story for an actual audience. By this, I would say, I mean so-called stories that would better be preserved for your, I don't know, deserted Facebook timeline, whatever, or, a personal blog, but not a publication that you expect to pay for your article. That means that your pitch and your story should not be, that doesn't mean, obviously, that the pitch and the story should not be about you. Of course, it should be about you in some way, but it should be about your angle and the perspective you can bring into this pitch and into the story. And that's where we get back to the selling and kind of business talk, and it's really hard to talk about it, but I think it's necessary to kind of address it, because you should always at least to some extent reflect on what people are interested in or might be interested in after you pitch and publish a story, at least to a certain degree. I mean, common questions you could ask yourself or pose yourself are or might be if like there's a great hook to an already covered story we all missed somehow until now, you know, or if there's a single and trending topic that would interest a broader amount of people. It's not really a secret, you know, that your story needs to sell. I mean, a publication is basically a business, at least to some extent, if you want to live of it, and they need to survive to some extent, and they want to sell and make an audience, you know, and so don't be surprised if there's, you know, at least a tiny financial aspect involved in the whole thing. And this brings us, you know, to the question we already kind of addressed in a way, what the story is about and what a good story, well, basically is a good story, you know, and that's really an important question, I think, that not a lot of people consider, and I think even few can answer. And again, there is not really a path that you can take that is right and or wrong. I mean, there are so many ways to do this, and I mean, at some point, a good story, you know, if you want to narrow it down, a good story is basically about an interesting angle, and we talked about it. But at the same time, it's also in a way about what the audience, the potential audience, you know, decides to think is interesting or important, which kind of means your take is worth, you know, for someone's already limited and damaged attention span to spend their time on clicking on the article. And I don't even say reading it, because clicking is already a way to just approach things, and reading it would be even better. But, you know, you want, in a way, you want to be in the position where you can tell, okay, people might be interested in this story because it hits a certain, you know, zeitgeist or whatever. So how do we get to the point where we can say that we do have a good story? And as said, I mean, there may be an unlimited, you know, number of right or wrong takes, and we don't really have, you know, time to go into details here, because I'm talking. I mean, I hope you're still there, but I'm talking way too long right now. But I see some faces that are grinning. Yeah, okay. But you know, we want to ask ourselves what a good story actually is, and that there are some takes that are, you know, right and wrong. Of course, that's true, but you should ask yourself this question, and you should answer this question for yourself, because there's nobody out there who can actually answer this question for you. And therefore, I would say you should always ask yourself, are there some, you know, is it not only a story about me, but can people relate with the story, or is there some potential, you know, resonance, at least to a certain number of people? And, you know, and you also, in a way, you should also, and I have this in my notes, it's kind of, you know, meant as a joke, but I tell it anyway. And is the world in need of another story and feature about, you know, Richie Hawtin's record collection? And, you know, well, it actually may be, but you know, the thing you want to ask yourself is it really interesting to read about that? After, you know, there are so many stories about Richie Hawtin out there, and I mean, it's just an example. I don't have anything against Richie Hawtin, but is it a piece you would say that makes a whole lot of sense, you know, in the current situation we're all basically in and we are all basically facing? And then I generally say, no, it doesn't make any sense to pitch, you know, a story about going to Richie Hawtin and delving into his record collection. And that's not because, you know, it's not interesting to see his record collection. I guess he has a wonderful record collection and stuff. But, you know, you want to ask yourself, is it timely and is it on spot? And I don't think it's on spot, you know. Why not thinking about featuring someone who's not a white male electronic artist, who basically culturally appropriated the roots of techno, or why not think about, featuring a POC artist that tells their story firsthand, or maybe even thinking about POC women who by chance happens to be a great artist, and that's something you want to consider. It's just a mandatory step now. You don't want to have the same, the same structural bias in your pitch and therefore your story, your potential story, as some biased journalist, covers. That's not what you want to have. And I mean, people, by just thinking about it and by just considering it and bringing it into your pitch, you may open a new angle and you may open a new perspective that's really interesting for a lot of people. And that's what the story should be about, adding something to the conversation and, broaden our horizon, as pathetic that sounds. But, you want to really open up a conversation, and you really want to do that by finding an interesting angle and an interesting, perspective on the story. And, by that, you also tend to find yourself asking what is really important to consider a Richie Hawtin record collection delve to be important as a pitch. I mean, you get to that yourself, because if you're considering other topics and consider to getting a little bit out of your comfort zone, that you find kind of yourself, in a way where you really see that it doesn't make any sense to, just, going into a interview with Richie Hawtin talking about his record collection.
Speaking of opening up the conversation, sorry, Christoph, to interrupt you, but I feel like there are a lot of questions, and thank you so much for your input. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Is there? Sorry, is there anything you wanted to add?
No, I mean, basically, I would just tell a little bit more about the impact of a story, but it's not really. It's 2:15 already. I really talked a lot, and sorry for that. But nobody stopped me, actually. Sorry.
But, here I am to stop you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for all the input and for having this editor's perspective, as you said. I don't know, speak for everybody, but I feel like most people interested in this workshop are freelancers, and it's very interesting to hear from an editor's perspective. And
that's basically what I wanted to tell. Definitely. I mean, that's the experience I had, and I mean, I don't want to speak for everyone, and I said it before. I don't want to generalize all of this, and it might be useful, but it may be pointless to others. So it's just a way of. I hope I didn't stir up too many rambling thoughts, and I don't know.
No, that's fine. I was maybe everybody can think about their questions. Like, I would like to have the participants now, if you have any questions, just raise your hand virtually in the chat. We've already received one question via YouTube, but I have one follow-up question. I mean, I have a lot of questions, but maybe we can start because you were basically talking a lot about forming out your idea and pitching and the story that you need to convey. But I think there comes a step before that, because you'd actually need to pitch yourself, right? I mean, if you are doing a cold pitch to a magazine, and I don't know if that was, you were referring to some of those cold pitches you had, like there were people you didn't obviously know, and you don't know where they're writing from and stuff. Like, what do you consider as a good, successful way? Like, how do I pitch myself? Like, what do I need to include in an email to make me a relevant writer for this? Do you think it's important that I have people in the magazine who pitch me, like to use like in a way of vitamin B connection? Like, what is the best way to approach an editor? I don't know.
I mean, it's really hard to narrow it down, because it depends so much on the publication you're actually pitching at, and it's always, I tend to say it's always a little bit of a subjective process that you can only make better if you get the chance to actually work in the field and have your own experiences. It's so hard to tell. That worked for me, but it probably doesn't in the next 5 pitches or cold pitches I make. It's so hard to narrow it down. Of course, you're right. You're absolutely right about just saying who you are and why there should be a reason to let you publish a story. Thing is, I would also say that you have to do it really succinctly, at least not writing out your biography and not writing out your whole life story in the pitch. You maybe want to have 1 sentence or maybe 2 sentences where you say who you are and what you do, and that's it. Because at the end of the email, you can still go on and say, hey, yeah, I did numerous stuff on this side and on that side, and you can include basically links to your work and to the stuff you've already done. But I wouldn't do that at first. I would get to the point as fast as possible, because I tend to say that receiving a lot of emails as an editor, the hard part is, sifting through all the ideas that you get. And I mean, it's interesting to know who you are and what you can, but if the story is right, I don't want to be biased and tell you, yeah, you've published in the Wire magazine, so I can, tell that you can write a story. I don't want to have that. I want to be as transparent and to be as open as possible, because there is some bias. At the moment, you see that some people have, written for that publication. There's some bias included in that, and you can be as reflective as it gets, but you don't get that out of your head anymore, I guess. So just introduce yourself with a sentence or 2, and then pitch your story. And if you still want to say something about yourself, do it at the bottom of your email, where "not sent from your iPhone" should stand, But yeah, well, that's basically how I would do it and how I suggest to do it. But as said, I mean, you might have different experiences on it, and I can't really speak for anyone besides me, and that's basically how I would approach it. But it wouldn't be, I think it's not the golden rule. Many people tend to be very into this stuff, where they can actually know where people have written about, and
it seems to be important as well. I mean, you need to have some reference in some way.
Sure, but if the pitch is good, I can assume that you might have put some work into this pitch, and I don't want to be in your way giving out and telling your story. That's I mean, it always tends to be a little bit, and I addressed this at the beginning, like this glass ceiling where people don't really can get through. A lot of people are dancing on it, but a lot of people are standing below the glass ceiling and want to get their words out, and they can't, because of the structural bias we all have in this industry and in this field we're working in. And
yeah.
And
definitely.
I think that's a really, really, really hard way to tackle. And if you're not really into this, I published my thing there and that, and that's an easy way to do it, I guess, just to make sure you're not biased from the very first sentence in your email. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people tend to answer those questions differently, and
sure. But we wanted your subjective perspective,
sure.
which is why we're asking you. So, thank you. And speaking of this glass ceiling, this maybe fits with the first question we got from Gustavo. Gustavo, would you like to speak for yourself?
Yeah, why not?
Hey, Gustavo.
Hi.
Hi.
What should be our approach as cis white men, as you said, to reivindicative topics and movements like feminism, sexual diversity, abolition of racism, abolition of classes, etc.? Should we also intersect these movements, these topics in our music journalism, or should we leave it to more pertinent people who are already active in those movements?
Yeah, I get what you mean. I tend to say that we should always speak or let people speak for themselves. You don't want to interfere with something you don't really really know, you know. I mean, I have this, I mean, it doesn't really have to do anything with feminism, but it has to do with music. And I have this little anecdote from my time at Noisy, and it basically was, I was entitled to write a piece about heavy metal biopic trailer, you know, like some trailer wise, partly produced, full disclosure, but it wasn't anything special to begin with. So I did write this article, and we put some time into a headline and a preview and posted it. And after 5 minutes, you know, my social media manager would get to me and say, "What the fuck did you do? People are, you know, freaking out on Facebook." And apparently I got one little detail on the trailer wrong, and they were freaking out over it, you know, just like rambling on Facebook. And of course, this is great because you get a lot of engagement and therefore a lot of you know, traffic to your website, but you don't want to be the website and publication that got this little tiny, you know, detail wrong. So, I mean, I learned from this basically that you should also should always consider, you know, what you're writing about. And if there's not somebody who is basically more, you know, more, how do you say, more fit and apt to really write about this story, because I didn't know enough to really put a great story into this, and people knew, and the heavy metal scene, you know, they were just kind of freaking out over it. And you know, that's really, I mean, that's not necessarily the same thing with feminism, or definitely not the same thing with, you know, Black Lives Matter, for example, right now. But if you have the chance as an editor to let somebody write who's in the movement or active, or, you know, just part of you know, of the story, it might get such a better story, you know. And you don't want to you know, fuck up things about something you don't know, you know. And that's basically what I did back with this, you know, heavy metal story biopic, you know. And I don't know if this answers your question, but, you know, it's very hard to say, do I have enough knowledge? Do I have, you know, the permission, in a way? I say this absolutely, and I'm absolutely serious. Do I have the permission to talk about this topic? Because as said, I mean, as a white cis male person, I have a very limited perspective, and there may be, you know, a lot of other writers out there who have like you know, a more broader experience on this or that topic, and I want to actually, you know, engage them in writing it down. And as an editor, it's your responsibility to find somebody who's apt to write a story. And I think it's absolutely necessary to stress this, because otherwise we don't get things changed.
Does that answer your question? Thank you. Yeah, maybe I can add to that, because I was actually, as you mentioned, Black Lives Matter, I was speaking to a friend of mine who is also a writer, and she's a Black woman. And I think there's also a problem if you only approach Black people to write about those topics, or only approach women to write about feminism. There's also the problem that there might be some kind of a tokenization. So I think you also have to be really careful being an editor with things like that. So
absolutely, yeah.
I think there should be more a way to engage them in the day-to-day business with other topics as well. I think we have to be really sensible when it comes. Definitely, of course, it's a good thought, but sometimes it's just thinking beyond those. I
mean, the very thing you want to do is to tackle those structural problems. You know, it's still such a biased industry. You know, and by actually, you know, giving way for people who may have never had the chance to actually write their text, or maybe write their opinion and write their way of seeing things, you don't change that, and you actively want to change it, and I don't see so much, you know, happening. I mean, there's a lot happening now, but I don't see that this problem is stressed enough and featured enough on. And I think it's a really great opportunity to talk about this here, because we are all coming from different parts, and I don't know. I mean, that's maybe a question for an open discussion as well. How you think and see, and how you kind of engage in these situations. I don't know. Maybe I just ask in the round, but if somebody's interested in sharing their knowledge and their experiences, I'm pretty much interested into it, because it's so hard to see it from my limited perspective here in Austria or whatever.
Yeah, maybe we can get to this in a bit if somebody feels generous to talk about it. But there's another question from Lucy. Lucy, are you happy to talk on the video or with the audio, or shall I read it? Okay, I read it. Okay, so Lucy writes, when I pitch, at the back of my mind, I'm always thinking of the readers. What will my story offer them? I try to make a conscious effort to really hone my pitches. What I can add is that communication is key. I found that if you have a long time before submission, editors really appreciate quick updates with how you're going. If an artist or expert is tricky to get hold of, just drop your editor a line. I know lots of freelancers worry they are bugging their editors, but in my experience, the editors appreciate being kept in the loop. I think that's a very good comment on all those things, like how to progress, because actually that's the question that came into my mind, how we deal with the topic of time framing, because you pitch something and then, I mean, you haven't probably asked the people you want to interview when you do the pitch, and then you want to like reach out to them, and then it takes a couple of days, and like how would you also, I think that's a very good input. Thank you, Lucy.
It's very important to say.
But how do you consider this if you get a pitch? Like, do you want to have a time frame in there as well?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on what the topic is really about. If it's super timely, then we talk about like a day maybe, or maybe within hours, if it's a breaking news stuff or whatever, breaking news essay or whatever. But sure, you always want to have some time frame involved in it. And I think it also, being an editor also entails that you actively ask, how long do you want to take for this story to write, and how long do you need to take to write this story? Because I mean, there's always a plan to the whole publication. There's always a publishing plan. You want to keep things, in an organized way. And if it's not super timely and the topic is very broad and very, general, and that doesn't fit into a certain time or into a certain, just it may just fit in a certain time, obviously, and not being super timely. I think it's good to say, hey, how long do you need to interview those people? How long do you need to research this? And when can I expect to have this story to bring it to narrow it down? So I think it's always a big thing to as an editor to communicate, and as Lucy said, communication is key, and being an editor doesn't stop saying no or yes to a pitch. Basically, it's the active work you spend with somebody and somebody's ideas that you want to get published. And as I said before, I mean, it's a very cool responsibility, but you have to take it very seriously, I guess, and not not really fuck around, basically.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Thank you, Lucy. Thanks, Christoph. There's another question from Jamie. She wants to ask directly, please.
Hi, Jamie.
Hi. Thank you for sharing so far. I have a question kind of related to what we just talked about. So, for example, say if a pitch is not obviously terrible, you look at it, it might have some potential. Could you maybe talk about more of what that process of how a pitch goes from potential to yes, or what goes through your mind, or what your thought process once you've seen a pitch like this and trying to decide, or if it's like obviously yes, this is the story.
That's a very good point. I mean, Christopher also pointed it out, because we had a working relationship for quite some time at Specs, and I pitched him some stuff, and we were basically 3 and 4, giving our thoughts there, and you know, he was giving some input. I was basically, you know, saying, yeah, I don't want to do that, and and I mean, yeah, it's an important point to talk about, because a lot of pitches are in between some lukewarm idea and a very good pitch, you know, and you don't want to waste those pitches, because there might be an angle or a perspective or a hook that just might be, you know, hidden behind the next corner, and maybe it just needs to you know, needs to rest for, I don't know, for a couple of days, or just, you know, for some more thoughts, and to put some more thoughts into this, because it's always a bit difficult to just say, yeah, no, that's not a story, and not a story you want to pursue, and therefore it really makes sense to how do you say, like work actively with the person who's pitching you, because in the end it still is an idea. It may be a high thought, or just some idea you fired off from your phone, which you shouldn't, but it's still as a writer, I would want my stuff to be considered seriously, and that's basically the responsibility an editor has, to consider the stuff you get responsible, and in a responsible manner, and in a serious manner, I guess. And from there, it's really hard to say where things might be going. And I mean, if we have the you know, the luxury and the privilege to sit in a room and basically, you know, kind of, you know, brainstorming an idea, it's so much more easier, especially if you have a working relationship and not cold pitching someone, because obviously the thing is, if you cold pitch someone and the story might not be on point, they probably don't invest so much time into your thoughts, and it's really hard to say where to draw the line, actually. I would say, for me personally, and during my time as an editor, I considered all of them. I mean, some were terribly bad, and I turned them down, but a considerable amount of them were, you know, just some thoughts that just needed that little bit of more thinking it through, and giving it an interesting angle, especially for a noisy audience. So, you know, I don't know if this answers your question, but it's really hard to narrow it down to a general answer, I guess. It's really a give and take, and that's basically what Christoph and I had for some time at Specs. And yeah, I mean, it's fun if you have a working relationship and can share and give and take those thoughts, you know. But it's hard if you don't have a working relationship and cold pitch someone. And if the story is not on point and the pitch is not on point, then you might never get an answer, and that's really depressing and annoying in some way. And yeah, maybe if you ever get into the position of doing it, change it, and, you know, consider it to be, even if you get a lot of emails, consider it to be part of your job and part of your responsibility for being a good editor, I guess.
Yeah, maybe I can say something about this. Oh, Jamie, do you have something to add?
No, go ahead. Thanks.
Okay, because this directly involves me. So, we had a special situation at Specs Magazine, the magazine I was writing at, because we took things rather slowly. We would publish one article per day. So we made a point out of trying to have conversations with our writers beforehand, and I think, like, just arguing about a pitch, because I think the last example was that I actually wrote you about something, and I had a fairly clear idea where I wanted to go with the article. I just wanted you to write it,
right?
And
I wasn't so sure about it, but yeah,
you weren't so sure about it, but you argued against it, and in that, like, you convinced me, which basically was, you know, like, already sort of part of the writing process, because a lot of what you've been talking about today is so much just like intertwined with, like, already writing, conceptualizing a story and whatnot.
Right.
And One other thing that I wanted to mention, I've never given a shit about receiving emails sent from anyone's iPhone. I find it really weird that you say that, because also like the email signature is the last thing that I see, and if you haven't convinced me until then maybe okay, I'm thinking, yeah, okay, someone just hastily typed this on their phone, but if it's a convincing pitch until then, that doesn't change
you
anything.
probably get that before you get to the bottom line of the email where it says sent from my iPhone. But you're right. I mean, I tend to find it a little bit annoying because I have this assumption that you just fired it off, and without that much thought putting into it.
I mean, and I'm not a fan to be contacted by anyone about any kind of subject via social media, but I guess like sometimes if people don't really find your email address, whatever, like also that is fine, I would say. But yes, it always.
But can I just ask, because this thing with social media, I mean, it's a very common thing to get in touch via Instagram on something like that. I mean, I really don't, I mean, Twitter is made for those, like people get jobs via Twitter. So I don't really get why people, or why you, especially like what should people do if they don't find your email address?
I mean, if you don't find the email address, that's another thing. But obviously, if you put a little bit of research into it, you probably find the email address of a person if you're not, like using internet browser from 1989 or whatever. It's just I don't see the situation where you don't find the email address. So I mean, I wouldn't be super interested into mixing up my. I mean, it's always a bit hard to say this, but I don't want to mix up my personal stuff with my professional stuff. And if I get contacted via Twitter, obviously, I mean, it's a social connecting platform, but I wouldn't want to receive pitches over Facebook and Twitter. I don't know. I mean, it's just as I said. I mean, I speak for myself. I'm not really into it. If you're fine with somebody sliding into your direct messages, that's okay. But it's just not for me, and that's basically what I was trying to tell. But if you're fine doing all that, that's super cool. I mean, I don't want to argue against it. I don't want to argue for it, but that's basically what I can say on this.
Sure. Two different perspectives. I mean, you can all slide in my DMs. I don't care. You can pitch me via Instagram.
But
sorry, but I didn't want to interrupt.
By the way.
No, but I also think which like brings it back to everything kind of depending on the editors, because obviously if you have some editor that you want to pitch to, obviously it makes sense to choose the channel that is most appropriate for them, and if they're very, very social media savvy,
maybe they say
it makes sense to just like, I don't know, like try to write them a message on Twitter rather than like trying email or whatever. But brings me to like a more general question, because I'm in this interesting situation where I've been an editor for 5 years, and now suddenly I'm a freelancer again, and I have to pitch, and I've been really good like for a certain amount of time to like suppress the intense imposter syndrome that I had to deal with like throughout like 10 years of being a music journalist, because like who am I to like, I don't know, like say anything, like what's my opinion worth and whatever. And suddenly after being the one who receives those things and who just mostly try to get like into dialogue and like like sort of like, I don't know, like be receptive and whatever, I realized that like, obviously like a lot of people don't have the time for that, don't have the resources for that, which I totally understand. But like now I'm in a situation where I also figure out that like, I have ideas, they're good, I think. There's an audience for that. I can write articles. I've written a lot of articles, but I can't fucking formulate a good pitch for the life of it. Even though I'm very, very sure I would make like it would turn into a great story. But really, like writing pitches, writing like the subject line of the email, those are really, really tough things for me that now I have to deal with. And I think like the power relation between like, you have to speak with an editor, obviously, is like very, very crucial when it comes to that. So
oh yeah, definitely, yeah.
I don't know if there was a question at all, but I mean, I think, I don't know, and I would be curious to hear about other people who can speak mostly from a freelance perspective. Like, what's your experience with that? Like, what could editors actually, if any editors are listening, what could editors do better?
Maybe we can just pose this question. I mean, is it addressed to me, or maybe we can just pose it to, I don't know.
I think a little
Gustavo
bit.
wanted to talk. Is it to address to me? Okay, yeah. Well, maybe Gustavo or Gio wanted to say something before, right? I don't know.
Yeah, I think one of them, Gio?
No, yeah, I think it's pretty related. You mentioned something about, by the way, thank you. You mentioned something about blind spots earlier. And maybe this is related to this, like, have you noticed any blind spots for editors and for freelancers pitching?
So my own blind spots, you mean, right?
Sure.
Yeah,
Or
I mean, sure. Sure. I mean, I think we all do have them, you know, like just talking before about, you know, not giving way for somebody who's not have written for the Wire magazine or whatever, you know, just some new one, just some new guy or just some new person coming along with a good pitch and, you know, considering him or her or whatever, you know, it's just a step that a lot of people I knew back then didn't make. They wanted to have working relationships. They didn't take cold pitches. They had like this circle, you know, this circle and this bubble where they can fish, you know, for writers and freelance writers. And they never got to the point where they actually, you know, reached out to others. And I think it's just the wrong direction to take. Sure, it's coming with some, you know, security and some, you know, routine to a certain point, because you know what you expect from certain people after they've written for you for you know, several years or several stories or so. But I think it's really important to work against this, you know, this little gated community of what we're having right now in a way. I mean, I repeat myself in a way, but the glass ceiling is still there. You know, some people are pushing against it, but a lot of people are actually dancing on it, and it doesn't change so much. And a reason to actually tackle a blind spot like this is just to make it more accessible and more transparent and more, you know, diverse. It's just about diversity, I guess, and just giving people the chance, especially if you're an editor, the possibility and chance to write a story. And that's pretty much what I would say is a blind spot that's generally misconcepted, and, you know, and generally a lot of times forgotten. And I think we have to stress it, and we have to point it out even further. And you know, it's hard to say, and that's the reason why I stress this so much today, I guess. But I want to change that, and I want to see other people doing the stuff, because the cake is good enough and big enough, even if it's seemingly rotten. But yeah, I think, I don't know if this says this kind of answers the question, but I would consider myself to reflect on those topics, and I try to, and I'm open for, you know, for critique if I miss a spot or miss a point. And I think that's also an important step to do. Be open for critique and for different angles and perspectives and stuff. Just not stay at the same spot and you know, pretend like it's 1999 or whatever, you know.
Would you like to add anything to that?
No, yeah, actually, connected to that, and trying to connect it to what Christoph was saying, Christopher, about what about from the freelancer's perspective? Are there any things that we're missing out on when we're doing these pitches, or like writing the pitch, or what, in your experience, as a freelancer or as a writer pitching?
this one is addressed to Christopher or to me, Gio?
If I could answer that question, I would do a lot better as a freelancer and a lot better at writing pitches, I'm afraid, because I really am terrible at it. And that's just, yeah, I mean, maybe it has to do with like certain confidence issues, because like, you know, like I used to be an editor and like suddenly I'm in this situation again, which like, okay, like it's not, you know, like, so it's like just in very new and unusual situation. Obviously, that makes you a little bit insecure, and I maybe try to like make up for that by using the really big words or whatever. No, yeah, I think I can't really give an example or give a definite answer to that from newly. So again, freelancer's perspective. I'm trying to think if, yeah. If I can answer it from a former editor's perspective, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, a lot of what Christoph said today obviously applies. Like there should be like a story, like some kind of idea, and it doesn't need to be, you know, like really, really big. But if you manage to sort of convince me, okay, first off, this is an interesting topic, and or secondly, you're the right person to talk about it. That should be a given. What that takes is, well, a little bit harder to answer, because I don't know, like if we just connect some things that Christoph was like showing us, like if you would, I don't know, pitch to Vice, I'm going to the woods to drop LSD and listen to the new Taylor Swift album. Sure, everybody can pitch that, but who can actually write it?
Yeah.
And that's tough to understand. And as an editor, obviously, like, yeah, if I don't know you, I would like to look at previous examples of your work. So I think if I don't, yeah, like that should be included somehow. On the other hand, I think maybe, yeah, you need to tell me a little, like why you going to the woods to listen to Taylor Swift's new album is actually an interesting or entertaining thing to read or whatnot. And you can, I think, convey that sort of like feeling by like writing in a certain style already, or by arguing, of course. I mean, but yeah, what are the blind spots? Yeah, it's really tough. It's really tough. And I would say a lot of it just, well, depends on the, how do you say, the arbitrariness, so to speak, of the editors, because that's a sort of power relation there that you can never really fully dismiss, which, yeah, I think Laura wanted to.
Yeah, I just want to add a very practical thing, actually, because I think everything you do in journalism depends on networking. I mean, it really is key to anything. I mean, before, and that's why I was stressing this so much, that you have to pitch yourself. It's because you have to get to know the editors, I think. That was, from my experience, what always worked best. If you manage to give them a call, maybe even if you can find out, like if they're up for it, maybe it's better to just go over, have a cup of coffee, introduce yourself, let them be like they have to know you. And it's all about, I mean, yeah, it seems arbitrary, but it's also about like personal interaction also. I mean, we can see it that we have a circle of writers who write for us regularly at Groove, because we know them and we trust them. And you have to get to this point. It's very important. I think it seems in a way banal or something, but that you just go over and try to have lunch, try to keep in contact, and like to, I don't know, I think that's, in my opinion, I feel that always seemed to be quite an important part as well.
But is that something that is like in any kind of way positive? Because first off, I'm a person and not a brand. And secondly, I want to be hired on the basis of my writing and what I have to say. So, but of course, we're talking about some just like constraints, and like, yes, like there's like always like sort of like in grouping, there's like always those circles, and connecting with people or socializing or doing all that, like, well, it's labor actually. It's not you're not being social, but like you're working with someone even though you don't get paid for it. So it just yeah, I think, I don't know, I'm not disputing what you're saying, but I think I just would say that, like, obviously that is something that should be viewed very critically, because it also reinforces certain power structures that are there, because yeah, you know, we all know how, like, some magazines, how things are going there, where it's just like, okay, yeah, like, I know this person, like, we've, I don't know, been drinking buddies for a few years, so like that person will also write this article.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. And it's not that I'm not critical about it. It's just like you can decide to play the game. And I mean, if you're a freelancer, you're practically your own company. So I think it's clear that you need to, in a way, put yourself in the market. But I don't know. I mean, it's a way of seeing those things. But I get, of course, we have to be critical of those structures, and they reinforce other structures. Anyways, sorry.
Yeah.
Just to drop by. Can I ask another question from YouTube, because this is actually the first question that was asked in the chat, and I think it's a very interesting one. So somebody's asking, hey everybody, how do you prevent your pitch from being reused after you've pitched and it has been rejected by the publication? So in a way, the editor stealing your idea, not giving it to you, and then using it to have somebody else write it. How do you, what are the ways, what can you do? Have you ever seen this happen, maybe from your experience?
Before I try to answer this question, maybe there's somebody in this round and in this conference today who has experience on this. Who I don't know. Is there somebody who has experience with happening stuff like this? You know, I mean, it never happened to me. It's hard to say, but I get what the point is. Yeah, is there somebody in this round where something like this happened?
Yeah, if you don't,
I guess nobody. But yeah, it's an interest. I mean, it never happened to me, and I get the point. I mean, there's this story of a young Berlin woman, I guess, from a couple of months or so, where they actually used their pitch, but it wasn't for an article. I guess it was just for something else. But I think it happens all the time. Yeah, if they just, you know, kind of, you know, turn it a little bit around and kind of use the idea you very much were pitching at them. I think, yeah, I mean, if you have an email, or if you have the email and if you have a screenshot of the email, you probably should go to social media with that and tell people to share it as hell, because addressing such things is very hard, and even harder when it gets to enterprises that are big and have a certain, you know, structure to it. But I would definitely go to social media and address them and try to be shared as much as possible, because otherwise I don't think that it's enough to just email them and say, hey, that was my actual pitch that you used here. And I mean, it's a ship move to do anyways, but I think it's actually even better to address it publicly and on, you know, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, Instagram, or maybe a TikTok, whatever. I don't know, but you know, just get the words out, because that's absolutely a shit show. I don't know how that feels actually. I think it's terrible, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think there have been a lot of documented cases, but I think for every documented case, there is probably 100 more where this was not publicly discussed, and it is a problem. And again, it kind of like shows how little power freelancers have over the narratives. Funnily enough, though, I'm gonna bring a reverse example, which is that we as a magazine approached a freelance writer about a topic, and just basically pitch this person, or rather ask them, hey, do you think you could write about this? Do you have the proper connections, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And this person got back to us like, not sure if that is so interesting, actually. 2 days later, it was on the front page of Germany's biggest magazine, written by, you guess who. So that was a sort of funny reversal of that sort of a power relation, but it was also not nice to be on the receiving end. I think you cannot possibly prevent it necessarily. I wouldn't know how. I wouldn't know how. But trying to make it transparent that it has happened, I think, yeah, should be an option. Even though for many journalists, I think like freelance journalists like wouldn't want to speak out, because I mean, if you try to like, you know, if you try to fuck with like some magazine, then obviously this may backfire on you personally, and living precariously as it is, you maybe try not to make too many enemies. So yeah, I think, yeah, that's a pretty devastating conclusion, I think, when it comes to that question. But well, I guess the topic of pitching kind of, yeah, brings that with it.
I think that's a very good question, actually. Yeah, and I just because I never was on the receiving line of this, I would just miss it. That's another blind spot, actually. You know, just not being in the situation where pitches would get, you know, like stolen from you. But yeah, you're totally right. If you're a freelance writer starting out and you are basically at the bottom of the hierarchy, and the hierarchy is still there, even if some people say it's not. But if you're at the bottom of the hierarchy, you probably don't want to speak out loud about this, even if it's your pitch. And I think that's so important to actually counteract, you know, and speak against, you know, just if you see something like this, be solidarity. So how do you say it? Yeah, just show your solidarity, you know, and yeah, I don't know how to approach this any other than this, but if you see something
your own
like this,
platform, I think that's
definitely, even if you're somebody higher up in the hierarchy, show some solidarity and yeah, just don't let this happen, because it's a fucked up thing to do.
Do we have any more questions from you guys? If not, I have one question that was coming up as we were already talking a little bit about business, Christoph and I.
Right.
I was just wondering, me as a freelancer, because I obviously want to earn some money by pitching you a story, when do I put this in? Like, when do we talk about money? If I pitch you something and I tell you I want to write like 10,000 characters on this topic, and I would like to have this sum for it, or I don't know how much you pay, maybe, like, do I ask how much can you pay me for it? Do I make a suggestion? Do I put this in my first email? Like, when do we talk about money?
That's really a good question as well. I mean, I just switched to this slide here because I want to point out two newsletters. And if you are not aware of them, the first one is Music Journalism Insider by Todd L. Burns, and the second one is by Sean Ronaldo. It's called First Floor. You should definitely check them out, because the former one even comes with a how to pitch database where a lot of publications are in already, and you not only get how to, you know, approach them properly, or how they want you to get approached, but also how much they pay, and even if they pay even. So you might want to check this out, because it's kind of interesting to see. I mean, it's a paid newsletter, but it's just a coffee or two each and every month. And I strongly suggest you to check them out and support them, because it's very much, it's very helpful to get an insight, and it's just, I mean, they come weekly and bi-weekly, and it's very, very interesting to read about, and funny even. So I would definitely check these out. But on the in general, it's hard to say if you can go there and say, yeah, I want, I don't know, 150 euros for that. It may be a little bit of a stretch for a first and cold pitch. I think it's kind of, yeah, I mean, if you're starting out and don't know shit, that's a bit of a problem, and it should be more transparent. And something like this, as Music Journalism Insider basically is, prevents you from getting this intransparent. But yeah, I think it's hard to I wouldn't necessarily do it myself, actually. If I cold pitch someone, I wouldn't say I need so much money, and either that or I'm not going to write the story. But what's your take on it? I mean, really, if the story is pretty good, okay, maybe you got a chance. But if it's not, there might be no reply anyway. And I mean, it comes a little bit cocky in a way. I don't know. It's just, you know, I don't. Of course, it's about money, but in a way, I don't know how you guys think about this, but because I don't think that there's a final answer to this. But I wouldn't necessarily put that into my cold pitch, and I don't know. It's really hard to say. And I mean, if you know the person, it might be a lot easier because you have like not a working relationship, but kind of a relationship where you can ask more personally. But if you don't know the person you're pitching and you don't know the publication, it's kind of hard, I guess, to say, yeah, I want this amount of money to write this article. I think it's not like this anymore, even if it was ever like this. I don't know.
But I think it's very good that you talk about transparency, because I think Gio just posted a page into the chat, who pays writers. So maybe resources where you can find what publications actually pay. Like, we have to be transparent about it.
Thanks, Gio. That's a good one, actually. I forgot about this one, and you definitely want to check this out as well. Who pays?
And thanks, Aman, for the input. That he said, like, discuss the pay at the time that the conversation moved on to the word limit and the length, but it depends. Like, if you get the pitch, maybe then it's a good time to
absolutely. If you get the pitch
in advance before you get disappointed in the end.
Definitely, if you get the pitch commissioned, you want to talk about money, because you get to be disappointed at some point. Because I mean, there is not a lot of money involved anyway, but you want to sort out who's paying what up front, and maybe that's a good idea. Absolutely.
I think we are almost at the end, but there's Fadi who was actually talking to us before about a pitch he was going to make for Bandcamp. Maybe I can read what he's writing. A problem I'm facing at the moment with Bandcamp is that I'm corresponding with the editorial directory and fully fleshing out the piece, but we haven't discussed any financials at all up until now, which makes me worry that he might just take my idea and assign it to one of his full-time writers, and that would be it. This is really a problem. Thank you, Fadi, for the input. Which is why I think of course, it seems cocky to go by and say, I want this and this amount of money, but actually we have to, in a way, fight for ourselves, because you are on your own and they are, on the other hand, have a staff writer team behind them. Anything you'd like to add on that, Fadi, or did you just want to?
No, I'm just looking for advice, to be honest.
I mean,
it's hard to say. I mean, I tend to say that you don't want to be reluctant. You want to be provocative, but it may come across cocky to some editors, and you just need to get to the right editor to be like this in a way. I mean, it's always like this, and in general, I guess, but I tend to be a little bit more provocative, because it's like pitching, you know, it's easier to downgrade a daring thesis than upgrade some cooked up shit, you know. It's always easier. And that's basically what I learned at Noisy. Basically, that's the one point. But I think being a little bit provocative can do the cut, and you should actually not be too reluctant in that case, especially if you think that they might push it to one of their staff writers. I guess that just approach them head on and tell them, if I do this story, how much can I get? Because apparently you do have a email conversation already, and I would just tell them and ask them, even if it's politely. You don't have to be provocative. Don't use my words against me.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Our time's already up.
Yeah.
Oh wow, that passed really quick. Sorry for talking so much. I was kind of I'm also a bit nervous and I tend to talk too much, but I hope you forgive me and you learned some insights and some experiences. I don't know.
Well, I certainly do hope so. And I think all of the participants in the Zoom meeting maybe I would like to continue a little with the money talk. But our time is up so far, considering the regarding the live stream. So we are saying goodbye at this point, and maybe we'll convene into like a more closed circle. Well, tomorrow we're gonna have the last session for the first week of our 2-week workshop program. It's gonna be me. If you nonetheless would like to watch it again on YouTube at 1 p.m. CEST. And thank you very much for watching and participating, and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, guys. Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Christoph, and bye, guys.
Have a good day wherever you are. Bye.